Yesterday, we talked about offensive position battles. Today, it's defense time, baby.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. Happy Wednesday. I'm Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work for New York Giants on SI. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And yesterday, we talked about the Florida Gators offensive position battles heading into spring ball because that is coming up in the next couple weeks. And there's quite a few things to figure out, right? And if you're part of the insider program, you had a say in this, okay? Because what I did was I said, hey, what are the position battles that you're most interested in? And I just asked the insider program, and this is how we sorted it, okay? So for defense, also, if you want to have a say in it, join the insider program. The link's in the description below. Like, comment, retweet, all that jazz, you know. I don't know why I'm saying retweet. We're on YouTube, but you know, it is what it is. But cornerbacks is the first position that people talked about, which is interesting to me because we know that there's going to be a lot of moving parts here, right? From 2024, the Florida Gators lost Jason Marshall, Triquez Bridges, and Kam Jackson, okay? I understand that Triquez Bridges came in as a safety, but by the end of the year, he actually, which was nuts to me and is a testament to how much he was actually playing out at corner to end the year. Because don't forget, there was a long stretch where, like that whole back stretch where the defense was playing great, they basically weren't rotating, right? And so Triquez Bridges played the third most snaps at corner while playing the fourth most snaps at deep safety, while playing the ninth most snaps in the box and the third most snaps as a box safety. Triquez Bridges did everything, right? And he had the sixth most snaps as a slot corner. Like, he played everywhere. But he also played 353 snaps out wide. So you're losing Jason Marshall, Triquez Bridges, and Kam Jackson. And I kept Kam Jackson in this because while he only played like 85, 86 snaps the whole season, he was playing starter snaps on the outside to start the year, right? And so I think that that's significant enough where you could say, hey, you've lost 833 of your 1,779 corner snaps, which is like 46.8%. I feel like conceptually that doesn't sound like a ton, right? To lose 46.8% of snaps, because you go, hey, we've still got more than half our snaps available. However, corners usually have two of them on the field at all times. Maybe very rare situations you only have one, but even then, I can't recall a time Florida did that. I just can't. And so when there's two corners on the field, really, you've lost more than just 46.8% of snaps. You've lost a hell of a lot more than that, because now you are without quite a few impact snaps there. You've lost almost half of your snaps at a position where two guys play at all times. Not exactly ideal. And I'm only counting for Triquez Bridges. I'm only counting his corner snaps. I'm not counting anything else. Only the outside corner snaps. So you're losing a ton of snaps there. I think right now, a lot of us look at this cornerback room, and throughout the offseason, a lot of us looked at this cornerback room and we went, well, they're young, right? There's a lot of youth in the room. It's about projecting who's going to develop and who's going to take those next steps. And that's what Florida's kind of focusing on, where there's a lot of unknowns there. But I think for the most part, I'd feel pretty good saying that I think we can pencil in Devin Moore on one side and Dijon Johnson on the other, regardless of how you even feel about them. Like, this coaching staff played Dijon Johnson for 498 snaps out wide. Devin Moore played 247 snaps out wide, and he played half the season. Devin Moore only played in 7 games, and he played a ton of snaps out there. So I think when you look at Dijon Johnson, he's probably going to be a guy out there, which, by the way, I feel like he played really well. He got beat a little bit too much. I think that's just a straight up athleticism thing. But I think that you can look at Devin Moore and Dijon Johnson as the guys that you should pencil in as starters right now. Because they should be. They both played well when they were available. Devin Moore's just always hurt, but they both played well when they were available. Then you look at, this is essentially a battle for corner 3, right? Because again, I feel pretty comfortable saying that I think this coaching staff will start Devin Moore and Dijon Johnson as the outside corners. I don't think that there's a reason to not feel comfortable saying that. But then you look at what you have at corner 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, and you've got basically a bunch of question marks. Like Cormani McClain had his moments where he looked really good in 2024, but he was still clearly trying to learn the defense throughout the season. Because don't forget, he enrolled in the summer. He's not someone that should have been good, okay? He enrolled in the summer, had a couple splash plays like the pick 6 against Kentucky. Also the pass breakup against Kentucky. But when he came in against Texas, he looked kind of like when he started against Texas, he looked kind of like he was in no man's land. And against Georgia, had his moments that weren't great, right? Which in both of those games, a lot of people didn't look good at times, right? Georgia, a lot crumbled once DJ Lagway got hurt. Offense couldn't stay on the field. It wasn't doing a good job of staying on the field before that, but that game I can't fault you for it. And again, going into 2024, I was very open. My expectations for Cormani McClain were no expectations. I didn't expect him to do anything. Because, like I said, I'm going to treat him like any other walk-on. So I'm going to treat him. Hopefully he now has the defense down better and now understands it a little bit more. Because I do think that people often overlook the mental part of playing corner, especially in a quarters heavy defense where you have to actually know what your responsibilities are and you have to actually be able to execute and know what the rest of your DBs and the linebackers around you are doing. I think there's a lot more mental that goes into it than people realize. And like the pick he had was a great play, right? The broken up pass he had in the end zone against Kentucky was a great play, but he was reliant on his athleticism, which isn't a bad thing, but it's also not the ideal situation that you want to have at corner, right? So Cormani McClain competing for corner 3. Jameer Grimsley, blue chip corner from last year, competing for corner 3. Teddy Foster, a 3-star corner from last year, competing for corner 3. Ben Hanks Jr., true freshman this year, will hopefully all compete for those rotational snaps that are going to be available at corner because Billy Napier has often rotated corners. The only time he didn't really do that was last year when injuries piled up and he just didn't have the corners available to do it. But I feel pretty confident saying he probably would have done it if he had the snaps available there. There's a lot of length and athleticism in this room, but now, honestly, it's just about putting it together. That's it. We're going to talk about the front 4, really, for the rest of the day, because a lot of guys, a lot of snaps being replaced, right? We'll talk about that when we get back with Locked On Gators. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you will place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off, or if you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, or if you see a guy that's just going off, like, was it Sunday? I think it was Sunday when Cade Cunningham hit 7 threes. He hit like 2 or 3, and I was just like, oh, he's feeling it. I'm going to go over 4.5. I blew a bag on it, and it worked, right? I did the same thing with Grady Dick. It didn't work. Let's say that. So that sucks, but it works sometimes, right? Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free, whereas in the podcast and on YouTube. And like I said, I did not decide these positions. Not that I have an issue with the ones that were selected. I think they were probably the best possible options there. But This is based off what the insiders wanted, and the second most requested position that they gave, nose tackle, which is, of course, wide open, right? Like it's wide ass open. Like it's like that. Like we're talking about a receiver being just corner fell. He's running downfield. He's that open. It looks like a punt return. That's how open this position battle is. Because you lost Kam Jackson, Desmond Watson, and Joey Slackman, right? And Joey Slackman didn't play a ton of nose tackle, but he did play a little bit when they went light and when they had some injuries pile up at certain points in the season. You lost Kam Jackson and Desmond Watson. Those two players accounted for 285 of your 374 A-gap snaps, okay? Again, 285 of your 374 A-gap snaps. That's 76.2%, okay? And then when you look at the B-gap snaps, that's where Joey Slackman plays a part. Kam Jackson, Desmond Watson, and Joey Slackman accounted for 465 of the 1,246 B-gap snaps, 37.3%, okay? And I wanted to include those, which, by the way, I'm not including the losses of guys like Kelby Collins and Justice Boone, who also played B-gap snaps. Not including those guys. And TJ seriously played a few too, which I didn't even anticipate when I was setting this up. But you've got all those snaps gone, okay? And although it's not so much strictly the 0 or 1 tech, which is just head up on the center for 0 and on either shoulder of the center for 1 tech, it's not so simple as that. When we talk about nose tackles, that is often how people think about nose tackle, is just the guy on the center. It's also in the B gap, right? And so, or in between the guard and the center, kind of. Like the way PFF marks it. It's like if you're on the shoulder of the guard, it's counting it as that. It's weird. I'm not going to lie. It's weird. But you at times will have 2 players in the B gaps there. One will be a nose tackle, depending on the strong side. All right, you go over how they'll go under and they'll go away from it. We've seen it plenty, right? So you need a nose tackle for Florida that can dominate his A gap mostly, and play a good deal of snaps as well in the B gap, because that's going to be a just pure responsibility of his as a nose tackle, because that's just defense in 2025, right? That's what you're going to see. So you need a nose tackle that can man a lot of snaps in the A gap and also shift over to the B gap depending on what the offense is giving you and what the defense looks like behind you and all that fun stuff. It's great. Ron Roberts plays with defensive fronts all the time, so guys move around, which is why players like Kam Jackson, who's going to be, the same thing he was in college, right? A big A-gap stuffing nose tackle. Played 126 A-gap snaps, played 243 in the B-gap. Desmond Watson, huge. Played 159 in the A-gap, 146 in the B-gap. Like, these guys are massive human beings that many defenses would just say, hey, go head up with the center and deal with it. Like just wreck stuff. And they move around. So who's going to fill that role? Because the typical 3 tech is Caleb Banks, right? He's your pass rushing D tackle. And he also, by the way, played some snaps in the A gap. He played most of his snaps in the B gap. And the guy on the opposite side of the offensive line, as in if Caleb's on the right guard, whoever's on the left guard, that's going to be your nose tackle, right? Most likely options there. Mekhi Boyro has to be, I think, considered the early front runner for it, because he's got the most returning A-gap snaps. That's why I just say early front runner. Jamari Lyons coming back from an injury. I've pitched this idea before, right? I envision a defense where you can just have Jamari Lyons and Caleb Banks, and you just slide them to the strong side of each side. Like, you just slide them around depending on what you want to do. But I think they're both capable of playing both interior defensive line roles. And I think that makes you incredibly versatile. But if we're talking about production last year, Jamari Lyons didn't have any because he was hurt. So Jamari Lyons, Mekhi Boyro, the early front runners for it, right? DeAndre Robinson also played a good bit last year on the defensive line. He played more of that B-gap role behind Caleb Banks more than anything else, which makes a lot of sense. Mekhi Boyroe is playing more of the nose tackle stuff, or playing more of the nose tackle role, so that clears, we'll say. You've got Tarvorius Brown, the JUCO defensive lineman that joined just before the season last year, so I didn't see a ton from him. And then you've also got Stephon Shivers, right? Stephon Shivers, the 2025 true freshman defensive tackle that, I mean, Billy Napier has talked quite a bit about him, right? Like, you look at the early signing day press conference, and when they ask about Stephon Shivers, Billy Napier, first off, he kind of lights up a little bit. But secondly, he talks about this one specific play for Shivers where he takes a snap in the backfield, and it's the first play of his film. But I think it's his 2023 film, if I'm not mistaken. First play, takes a snap out of the backfield and houses like a 75-yard rushing touchdown, which is just nuts to do with Stephon Shivers being listed as 6'4.5", 365. Huge, right? 1 pound for every day of the year is nuts. And while, I'm not going to say I'm a massive fan of what we saw him actually do on the defensive line in high school, especially once he took the step up, I will say the same thing that I've been saying for a little while now, is that I think we can say Gerald Chatman has done enough as the defensive line coach to justify, hey, if you want him, go get him, and I'm cool with it, regardless of how I feel. Like, I think he's done enough for that. He had Mekhi Boyroe and DeAndre Robinson both as true freshmen, not just playing meaningful snaps, but playing pretty well in those snaps. And I think that that's important as well, of not just, they were on the field getting that experience, but they were playing pretty well considering the expectations. And so while, yes, we look at this and we say, that there's so many different directions this could go, there's so many different options here, while that's all true, I also look at it as I'm not concerned with it. Like at least with DB, with corner, we can say, okay, well, Will Harris is gone. He did a really good job last year. Will Harris is gone. So what's the secondary going to look like? We have no idea. But at nose tackle, we know who's coaching it. It's Gerald Chatman. We know what he looks like as a coach. We know what his resume looks like. We know what he did last year at Florida with a bunch of guys that it's not even like he had years to work with and develop them. And everybody got considerably better. Like, think about the interior of the defensive line last year. There weren't a ton of complaints about Desmond Watson. There weren't a ton of complaints about Kam Jackson. The two true freshmen outperformed expectations. Tarvorius Brown barely played, so we can't even really judge him. Caleb Banks had a career year. The only person that really underwhelmed was, Joey Slackman? And even then, look, he wasn't good, right? Which I fully admit, like, I thought he would be good, but he wasn't good, but he also wasn't awful. I know that people greatly exaggerate how bad he was. Okay? I don't think he was that bad. I don't think he was as good as anybody really thought he would be, but I don't think he was that bad. He's also the only one, like we said, that underwhelmed in 2024 on the defensive line. Like, that whole line, Tyreek Sapp had a career year. Like, everybody had a career year on the defensive line. I'm going to give that credit to Gerald Chatman. And so when I look at this, I'm just looking at young athlete with DeAndre Robinson. I'm looking at Tarvorius Brown, who is a great JUCO kid that we're going to see what he can bring to the table this year. And then two young nose tackles in Mekhi Boyroe and Stephon Shivers that I'm like, okay, let's figure it out. Let's just see what they can do. And I put DeAndre Robinson on here only because I think this defense is at a point where they might just say, hey, let's give it a shot, right? Like, DeAndre Robinson is 6'3", 300-something pounds. Might be like 6'3.5", but 300-something pounds. Let's just put him on the field, figure it out, and we'll worry about the specific position names later. That's how I think that they'll work it out. We're going to talk about the edge room next. Again, replacing a lot of snaps there. We'll talk about that when we get back with Locked On Gators. Thanks for being Locked On Gators, your first listen of the day, every day. We are available daily and free. We have us in the podcast and on YouTube. And we're going to wrap up today's show talking about the edge spot, which is, I know that a lot of people specified just or didn't specify. They generalized just edge as a room they were interested in. And this is something that we've talked about before, right? Like edge is a room that I'm very interested to see how it works out. Mike Peterson is coming back as the outside linebacker / edge coach. So Mike Peterson's coming back there. He's got another year with the guys. And I feel like for 2025, this is more about two things, right? One, figuring out what the rotation looks like. And two, who's going to play the significant rushing down snaps, right? Because when you look at the edge room and you look at strictly who you lost, it's Jack Pyburn went to LSU and TJ Searcy went to Texas A&M. And both of those guys played not just a lot of snaps at the edge, but played a lot of your run defense snaps, right? Like George Gums played barely more run defense snaps than Jack Pyburn, but also George Gums played another game because Jack Pyburn didn't play in the bowl game. So you've got all those snaps that are going to be cleared up on the edge that we're talking about and saying, okay, who's going to fill this role? It's not so much about who's starting where, it's about who's filling which role, which for me at least is, again, Jack Pyburn gone, TJ Searcy gone. That's 834 snaps. Justice Boone is gone. That's the 834 snaps, which I know a lot of people say Justice Boone didn't play much. He still played, 140 snaps? He still played 12 snaps a game. That adds up, right? Those are significant snaps. 12 snaps is 2 drives usually on average? That matters, especially in a game where you get 7, 8 drives. That matters. So Jack Pyburn, TJ Searcy gone as starters. Justice Pyburn is gone, or Justice Boone is gone. Jack Pyburn is also gone, obviously. You can look at who's going to be starting Jack, and I think obviously most of us look at George Gums and say, okay, he's the obvious starter at Jack. Tyreek Sapp is obviously going to be listed as the other starter, but there's different levels of edge, right? Which is why I'm just saying. And Tyreek Sapp works more with Gerald Chatman, if I'm not mistaken, because Tyreek Sapp plays more of a defensive line / edge, a hybrid, that he's more of a 5 technique, right? So he's more of heading up on the offensive tackle. He's still hanging and banging with the uglies, right? There's not much finesse going on there, okay? Where you look at Jack and you can get by with finesse and acceleration and let's say bend, right? Like you look at a guy like Princely's a bendy edge rusher. Mike Green from Marshall, if you're an NFL draft guy. Abdul Carter, bendy, right? Abdul Carter can do a lot, but bendy guys, right? Explosive guys, fast twitch guys. That's kind of your George Gums. And then on the other side, for Florida, you've got the 5 tech, the guy that's playing head up on the offensive tackle, the guy that's going to be doing all the dirty work and might be sliding into more of like a 3 tech, like a Caleb Banks role situationally, right? Especially like you can go Caleb Banks at the nose, Tyreek Sapp at the 5 tech, LJ McCray, or Tyreek Sapp at the 3, LJ McCray at the 5 tech, and then George Gums on the edge. I'm sorry. I'm nerding out over the fun possibilities you can have because this is a fun room. But as far as who's going to be the other stand-up edge rusher, because Florida, especially under Ron Roberts, they would frequently have 3 down linemen, 2 stand-up edge rushers, or 3 down linemen, 1 stand-up edge rusher, and 1 guy that kind of like goes rover a little bit. You could see that Aaron Childs is probably going to do that quite a bit, I would imagine. Reportedly, Pup Howard's going to do that a bit more than we expected, we expected that last year, but apparently they're actually going to do it this year. We'll see. But I think right now my early favorite for that starting edge rusher is Kam James. I think that what we saw in 2024, I don't want to say unlimited snaps because he still played 360 snaps. Like that was still a lot of snaps. So I don't want to say unlimited snaps because he played the 14th most snaps there, which was still like 4th most on the edge. But he played a lot of snaps there. So I don't want to say limited snaps, but non-starter snaps, right? In those, I think he did a great job in 2024. I think that he outperformed many expectations for him. Not that expectations were low. I genuinely just thought he played really well in the snaps that were available. I think he has to be considered an early favorite there. based on the 2024 film, but also, and I will say this because I know everybody's going to go, oh, LJ McCray. I think that the battle will look like Kam James going in as the favorite right now. LJ McCray competing for playing time there, but not so much competing for a starting spot. I think that he's going to be more so of Tyreek Sapp's backup than anything else, which is a good role for him, by the way, because they're going to rotate that spot quite a bit. So I think that Tyreek Sapp's backup is a good role for LJ McCray, and I think that it can get him positioned to just 2026. He's your guy there. Huge, especially if he's already got experience. I think Jaden Woods is another player that we're going to talk about that could play that stand-up edge role. And then they went into the portal to get Kofi Asari out of UMass. And I think that battle, Kam James, LJ McCray, Jaden Woods, Kofi Asari, I think that battle is going to be your main four. And whoever shakes out and whoever impresses the most will win. Personally, I'd look at Kam James, right? Like I said, I think he should be looked at as your early favorite for a good reason. I'd say he's like, if you're a gambler, like minus 130 odds is what I'd put him at to be the starter there. Just because, again, I think LJ better suited to the 5-tech. I think Jaden Woods, I don't want to count on a true freshman to start there. And Kofi Asari, like I've said before, I wasn't a huge fan of his film at UMass. So I've got doubts there and concerns there. So I got to see it before I believe it, right? So that's what I'm looking at. I feel like this is a spot where Florida has a lot of talent on defense. It's just about figuring out who's going to start, what the rotations are going to look like. It's not so much about, well, damn, we're screwed. No clue who's going to do what. Hopefully someone steps up. I think that you can look at this and say, all right, I feel pretty good about a lot of the talent there. Let's show they can actually put it together and then figure out the rotation there. Hopefully. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free, whether it's in the podcast and on YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Florida Gators football. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WMS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI, and I'll see you all next time.